Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Louis the city of St. Louis for nearly 8 years as an alderman before he was elected president of the Board of Aldermen on April 3rd, 2007. No other African American in St. Louis history had previously been elected to that position. As president of the Board of Aldermen, Mr. Reed presides over the weekly board meetings, assigns bills to each of the 15 committees, and decides which alderman will sit on those committees. Aside from leading the Board of Aldermen, he also sits on a variety of boards and commissions within city government. In college, Louis Reed majored in mathematics and computer science. He's worked for Edison Brothers Stores as the director of networks and telecommunications, and later for SSM Health as the manager of data networks. It is our great pleasure to have with us today the Honorable Louis Reed. Welcome to Conversation.
Well, thanks for having me today, Lee.
Wait, let's see. I think this is like your third time here. We're really glad to have you back. Today we're going to just quickly go over some of the things, and I know there's lots of them, some of the things that the city of St. Louis has been doing this year.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to talking to you about some of the things that we've been working on, everything from redistricting to some of the budget challenges that are happening all across America, and they have not skipped over St. Louis, although I wish they would have, but we caught them too.
Well, okay. Well, let's start with the redistricting first. Okay. Redistricting is a result of the census, the 2010 census that everybody filled out their forms and told people that where they live, and so it turned out that St. Louis had less people in it than they did during the 2000 census. Is that correct?
That's correct. We ended up losing about 29,000 people in the city, close to 30,000 people in the city. But
what is the current population of the city?
It's like approximately 319,000 now.
Okay.
So we were, 300 and, we're close to 350,000 people before. Now we're at 319,000 according to the current census data. But the interesting thing, if you look at the data, our data in the city of St. Louis, what you find is the 29,000 people that left the city, the overwhelming majority of them were kids of 18 years or younger, right? And so we lost a lot of school-age population. But the more interesting thing is if you take a look throughout the history of the city of St. Louis, in 1772 we had somewhere around 600 people in the city. That grew to a population of 865,000 people in 1950. In 1954, the desegregation of the school systems happened. So between 1950 and the 1960 census, we lost over 160,000 people or something. Yeah, it was pretty close to that. But every year since then, we've been on a population decline.
Okay. So now, you say you have around 320,000 people who are in the city officially by the census. You've got 15 aldermanic districts?
No, we have 28 aldermanic.
28 aldermanic. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, 28 aldermanic districts. Each one of them represent approximately 11,500, 11,400 people. Some of them represent a little bit more. And, within their job duties, it includes everything from, helping to round up stray dogs and cats to passing, ordinances to, going to community meetings, helping put block units together, responding to issues of crime in the city, just about everything that would a resident would have an issue with in the city, because
the city aldermen seem to have much more responsibilities in St. Louis than in other smaller communities. At least that's the way it looks to me. Is it true that the aldermen, each one of them, is given his own budget to accomplish certain things?
Yeah, small. Yeah, it's budget, but it's very small. If you look at the legislative branch of city government, Yeah, in terms of the cost per capita, we are, it's a very efficient cost per capita. It's actually fairly low when you look at other major metropolitan areas like Chicago and these other places. And we do have a small budget to handle just small things like, street repaving and some things of that nature. Although they fall in that aldermanic budget, they're really not technically controlled completely by the alderman, because the street director will come and say this street needs to be repaved, and I'm going to take $30,000 to do that. They say, "Are fine," and so on and so forth. And but yes, they do have a small budget to operate with.
Mm-hmm. So, as a result of this redistricting, some of your districts had to change. I understand that the districts have moved towards the center. Is that?
Yes, if you take a look, if you were looking at a map of the city of St. Louis from north to south, a lot of our northern population was, we lost a lot of population in the northern part of our city, and then in the, kind of the western central part of our city, we lost a lot of population in that. The further south you went, the population was fairly stable. But if you look at some of the demographic data, what you will find as you move further south, you'll find a lot older population where they are not raising kids and some of those things. When you get closer to the center of the city and to the northern part, that's where you will find more families with children, and that's the population that was impacted the most, ended up moving to another school district.
Last time you were here, we talked a lot, actually, about the schools. And of course, saying that neither you nor the mayor really have much to do with that. But it is the schools. The St. Louis schools are a real problem, as we've talked about on this show many times, and I think we talked last time about how the state came in and they took over the schools. Yeah. In your opinion, are things in the schools improving after this state takeover? And I think Mr. Sullivan is now the president of a three-person group.
Yes, I think that the things definitely have improved in the city schools. But see, part of our challenge is this. You've heard of a barrier to enter a market in terms of marketing terms. That barrier may be price, competition, it may be location, it may be weather, it may be anything.
Right.
But what St. Louis City really lacks is a barrier to exit a market as it relates to education, because from virtually any place in the city of St. Louis, you can be in a new school district within 15 minutes, right? In terms of commuter time, right? So if you work downtown and you're not happy with the school districts, you can move 15 minutes away and end up being in a new school district. What subsequently happens then is that you don't have the captive audience that you have in Chicago, LA, New York, some of those other metropolitan areas. So it becomes really important not to just have a quality school system in place, but to make sure that it's advertised and that the perception is that you are going to you can still get a quality education within the city, because you still can get a quality education in the city of St. Louis. But if you're not happy with the public schools, we have charter schools, we have Catholic schools, we have private schools. So a quality education is available to anyone who wants to get it, even from the public schools, because we still have some world-class, great public schools. But our perception is a system that is not operational, is a system that does not work. And when you have that perception, when you lack that barrier to exit, someone can move 15 minutes away, and people, by our data, have shown that's what they've been doing.
Well, I hope that perception changes, and changes soon too. As a matter of fact, I understand that the state legislature, because St. Louis School District is no longer accredited, there's some rule that says that they can go someplace else, and some of those districts like Clayton are screaming like, whoa, well, we can't handle all this just because somebody says they want to come to our district and some court said that we got to accept them. We can't afford all this. Yeah. Plus also you have to send money over there, or not you, but the school system has to send money over to Clayton or to Parkway or Rockwood or wherever children are going to.
Yeah, the money follows the child, and as right, it should follow the child. Right now the school system as it stands, you mentioned the 3-member board. One of the members is appointed by the governor, the second member is appointed by the mayor, and the third member is appointed by myself. And between those 3 members, they've really been working to turn the system around. They've put a great superintendent in place that they recruited from New Orleans, and he was really instrumental in turning that system around and getting it on track, and he's doing a great job. So I'm really, enthused about the plan that's in place, and not just the plan, but their ability to execute and their willingness to execute and executing the plan in the way it should.
All right, well, let's move on to some other things. Before this show got started, you and I were just sitting here talking about, of all things, dogs.
Yes, yeah.
But apparently this has become a real issue in the city of St. Louis, so why don't you just start from the beginning and just talk a little bit about what the problem is and what you think the solution might be.
Yeah, we have, our dog pound falls under our health director, or director of health and human services in the city. So, part of what's recently happened was there's been a very spirited and open debate about whether the city should stay in the business of going out picking up loose dogs and processing those dogs, either getting them rehabilitated back into the hands of people that would care for them, or the latter, which is what they would do is put the dogs down after a certain period of time. There's an organization called Stray Rescue in the city of St. Louis, and it's a phenomenal organization with a huge volunteer base. And what Stray Rescue does is they do a number of things. Number one, they're a no-kill shelter, which means that they will pick up dogs and they will rehabilitate that dog and train it, do everything they need to, and then find it a good home, right? And so part of the process they go through when doing that is teaching, not just rehabilitating the dog, but they work with the ultimate owner to teach them how to care for a dog and the proper care and things of that nature. And so it's a phenomenal organization. What recently happened was the city of St. Louis had some one-time funding from a utility tax thing that people had an opportunity to say, I'm going to provide $1 additional for animal shelter. It's $250,000 in that fund now, and the city said they're going to give the $250,000 to Stray Rescue. But when they give the $250,000 to Stray Rescue, they're eliminating everything that they were doing to pick up loose dogs on the streets and things of that nature, and reliant fully and wholly on Stray Rescue.
So they're really contracting it out. They're contracting out this governmental service.
It would be a contract out if it was operating revenue on an annual basis, but it's not. It's a one-time funding of $250,000 in an account that technically really doesn't even belong to the city, that we're given to Stray Rescue, and decreasing our budget line item by $2.7 million. So we're knocking $2.7 million off here. We're not passing a penny of that over to Stray Rescue, and we haven't really even got an understanding of Stray Rescue's capacity to ultimately deliver those services.
And it is a volunteer organization as well.
Yes.
I mean, they have some hirelings, but most of their people are volunteer staff, right?
They are.
So they could just disappear at any given time when you have a pack of dogs running around. Maybe there's nobody there to pick them up.
Yes, and therein lies the problem. And a number of legislators have said, okay, right now we have this list of residents that have called the city of St. Louis and said, hey, we have dogs loose in these places. Can you pick them up? And the city said, well, now that service is now being turned over to Stray Rescue, and then they haven't gotten the proper response. I don't know what happened there, but there's a whole list of people that said that, either A, we're not picking up any new animals because our facilities are full or whatever, but to a resident that has a loose animal or a pack of loose animals, they don't care if you have a full facility or whatever. They want to see that problem abated. Now, this isn't a failing on Stray Rescue's part because Stray Rescue's mission has been very, they have a
great reputation.
And they've been very clear about what their mission is. They're going to pick them up, they're going to rehabilitate them and find a home for them. Right. But the city of St. Louis should not walk away from its obligation to process, to remain part of the process, so that ultimately that resident receives a call. So there's one of two ways they can do that. Either A, they have to stay part of the whole solution, or B, if they are giving the whole thing to Stray Rescue, they must and they have to properly fund Stray Rescue. They can't just decrease their budget $2.7 million and say good luck. Because as you remember, Lee, what was it, 8-9 years ago, the McAllister kid was killed by a pack of wild dogs. And the chief of police at the time said this. He said, I had seen 1,500 dead bodies in my time as a police officer, but I've never experienced anything so horrific to see where a pack of dogs have fed on a child. And we can never have that happen again. So it becomes really important to put a plan in place
But you yourself have actually seen this problem yourself, haven't you?
Yes, I've seen less than a month ago, it may have been around a month ago, I literally with my own eyes and in all shock and amazement, I was driving down the street and I saw literally a pack of wild dogs running down the street. And it's the kind of thing as you see it and you say, wait, hold on, what was that? Because it's not something that's natural, something that you're used to seeing. So down, I said, that's literally a pack of wild dogs, no collars, no nothing, just running down the streets. And what you have to remember is that when that begins to happen, your dogs, they have that pack mentality, and they still have to eat, they have to drink, they have the natural things that they're going to have to do. And if they can find food, I'm sure they'll do it. But what happens when they become less domesticated and
they return to being wolves?
They return to being wolves. Yeah, and then the other thing is some of these dogs, not every one of them were bred in captivity. So if you have dogs out there, and some of these dogs have never been under,
human control,
ever, because they were born, on the streets.
Right. And if they had been mistreated by humans, then of course they might not have the right attitude towards some little 7-year-old or 8-year-old out there.
Exactly.
Time's running fast here. Let's talk more about the money issues. You mentioned that at the very top. What is the situation with the city of St. Louis now and your money issues? You have a certain number of people who you employ, you have certain obligations, and that all has to be met by an income. Is the income meeting all these obligations at this moment or not?
Yeah, one big advantage, and I think it's a huge advantage the city has, is that the city of St. Louis, us, our legislators, we have to present a balanced budget. We don't have a choice. We cannot present a budget that's out of balance. So what that means, what that does is it forces us every year to live within our means. So we can't choose not to live within our means and to leverage the city in other ways. And we've been able to do that over years. But the challenge comes when the tax revenue continues to drop, and you don't want to cut essential services. Where do you begin to cut?
What's
after
the
everything's
definition
gone?
of that central?
Essential services.
Essential. You're talking about
essential services.
Right.
The essential services that I believe are essential, or public safety.
So police,
fire, and those types of things.
Streets, I guess.
Streets, yeah. So water, yeah. All of those basic services that a person needs to survive and to raise a family within the city of St. Louis. We want to make sure those are first and foremost. some lesser essential services, we will look for ways to cut some of those services as much as possible and still be able to operate efficiently and deliver the services for the people. So this year we were, last year, this last year we were probably around $45 million is what we had to find in collapsing the budget. So when you look at that,
it's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. But when you look at it, our total budget is like $900 and some odd million. But the general revenue is really the budget that we need to cut that money out of. So the general revenue is about $450 million. All right. Now here comes the biggest challenge. Our pension payments are about $75 million, so we had to cut a check for like $75 million out of the $450 million. After we cut that, then we began to look for those cuts of the cuts of the additional $47 million. So you're not taking $45 million out of $450 million, you're taking it out of somewhere like $380 million. So it becomes a much harder task. We've done that through furloughs and a number of other things.
Where does your money that goes to general fund come from? How do you generate your income?
We have various different taxes. So we bring in all of our different taxes and things of that nature. Everything
that 1% tax,
earnings tax, that's a big one.
that became an issue in a previous election.
Yes,
and that is anybody who works in St. Louis, out of their check every week or month or whenever they get paid, 1% of that goes into a city tax fund, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that one up because that's the big one. That represents about a third of our general revenue.
Okay.
And just to put that in context, our police department, our public safety systems, that's about a third of our general revenue. So it's like $160-some million.
So that 1% is basically funding your police force, is what you're saying?
Not
somewhere close.
Yeah. If you want to take one item out and say what it funds, if you take one item out and say what it funds, but it doesn't. It's not a direct.
That, but So where else are you generating income?
We have that. We have a utility tax. All of our different taxes, utility tax, everything from property tax, all those taxes go into sales tax, all those things go into, ultimately making up that general revenue. But the number one, biggest one is the earnings tax, and that's a third of it. So, once you take a look at those, our tax collections have been on the decline for years. They've stabilized coming into this next budget year, so we're hoping to see an uptick begin to happen toward the end of the year and into the future again. Hopefully we're coming out of it.
Is there any way to increase I don't mean increase the sale tax rate, but to increase people shopping and buying in St. Louis so that you can create and generate more sales taxes there?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, and I continue to say this, I think one of the challenges for St. Louis in terms of people coming downtown proper to shop, aside from, if you're working down there or if there's a convention or anything like that, I think that you need, a couple factors. Number one, you need a unique buying experience that they're not getting anyplace else. Someplace, something like that, a store, whatever that's unique, that you can provide them with a unique buying experience to pass up the gallery and everything on the way downtown. The second thing that you need, especially for St. Louisans, is you have to be able to address the parking issue and the paying for parking, because St. Louisans, God bless them, at the end of the day, they're not really into going anywhere, paying for parking, and then to go pay for parking to go shop. Because why? Because they can go, from downtown. Crestwood is 15 minutes. The Galleria is 15 minutes from downtown, and you pull up. You don't have to pay. You don't have to do anything. You go right in. So
and all the stores are there.
All the stores are there.
Except, of course, the sales tax money is there in the county, in the St. Louis County instead of St. Louis City.
Exactly right. So if you have a situation where you're going to go to Macy's, right? If you don't live downtown, if there's nothing else you're going to be doing down there on a Saturday, do you go down there and you pay for parking, or do you go to the Macy's at the Galleria, or you end up going to the Macy's at the Galleria or something like that? So that's why we need that unique buying experience. We need to have other wraparound services to wrap around it so that people can make a day of it and really enjoy other things that are unique to the city of St. Louis, and tie, and leverage our walkable communities all at the same time, and address the parking issue. And we'll see an uptick in it from there.
We got about 3 minutes left here, and at this point I usually turn to the guests and say, is there something we haven't covered that you want to talk about before we go?
Yeah, our redistricting process this year, I'm really happy the way it went. Like we talked about earlier, it's every 10 years, the nation goes through this process. And in St. Louis this year, we went through the redistricting process. We had an inclusive process where we created basically a workshop that lasted for about 3.5, almost 4 months. And Alderwoman Phyllis Young was the chairman of the committee. She did a phenomenal job. Alderman Terry Kennedy was her co-chair, and he did a phenomenal job in working with all the individual aldermen, and instead of having a closed process where you pick off 15 votes, you go around in the middle of the night and I say, hey Lee, I need your vote, and I'll give you anything in this map you want if you give me your vote. And you say, well, I want this, I want that, I want that. And we said, okay, you got it, I got your vote. Well, what you've also done in that same breath is that you've alienated everybody in your borders by just isolating Lee. Well, what we did this year is said, okay, well, first thing we're going to do is interview everybody individually. We interviewed them, took down notes about the things that were important to them, and we interviewed everybody and their neighbors. Then we laid the lines down, not infringing upon their neighbors, except for where their neighbors said this wasn't or that wasn't as important to us. Then we brought people together in teams. So you would have to sit down with all of your surrounding neighbors and say what worked for you and what didn't work for you. And we had it worked phenomenally. Every single alder person was really great to work with. All of them really respected their neighbors and everybody's boundaries. And essentially we passed the bill last Friday, and there was no debate, there wasn't anything. We had to go back and remind ourselves we passed it because it was on the consent agenda, and we just passed it without debate. So it was, and we had 28 co-sponsors. Every alderman co-sponsored it, opposed to 10 years ago when we made world news because it was such a breakdown in the process. Mm-hmm. And you probably remember that when BBC was coming to town.
Really?
Yeah, the BBC even came to town. I mean, it literally made world news. Every news service around the world carried it. Jay Leno talked about it. I mean, it was such a breakdown. But this year we had none of that.
I want to point out to the audience that right now we're talking, it's July the 12th. This program is going to be shown in August, so that's the time difference between what you just said and why it's not just last Friday.
Okay. Yeah.
And in the last few seconds that we have here, and I mean few seconds, do you have hopes that the state Senate seats and the state rep seats are going to work out okay here as they redistrict?
Yes, I do have hopes, and it's a big challenge, and I'll be working on some of that this afternoon, trying to make some calls to try to get some of the final issues ironed out, but we really need to get those worked out.
Great. I hope so.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being with us. And to my audience, I've been speaking with Louis Reed. He is the president of the Board of Aldermen, the City of St. Louis. It's a big deal job, guys. There's a whole lot of work that goes with it. If you have any comments or questions, please direct it to him. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thanks.